Okay, I think we've got it all set up this evening. Had to mess with my setup a little bit, but we are ready to roll here. Good Wednesday evening to everybody tuning in wherever you may be. My name is Brian Schott. I am an independent journalist who's been covering Utah politics for more than 25 years. My website is utahpolitics.news. You can go there, sign up for my newsletter. If you want to support my work as an independent journalist, you can become a paid subscriber or hit the tip jar. But I am here tonight to talk about what's been happening in the world of Utah politics. Take your questions as well. I want to hear what you have to say, what you are thinking about. We'll just wait for a few more people to work their way in here. But if you have a question, a comment, go ahead and leave it below in the chat. Oh, got a Twitch viewer. In the chat, someone says, "Hello, Brian. Welcome to Twitch. Glad to be here. I've been on Twitch for a couple of weeks. I don't think this is exactly the kind of content that you normally find on Twitch, but you got to go where the people are. So hopefully you are. I don't think you're my first, and hopefully you're not my last Twitch viewer. All right, let's get straight into it. That one guy on TikTok, he says, "Maps, will they stand?" Your guess is as good as mine. The legislature sure seems to be talking like they don't think that they're going to be able to overturn the maps. House Speaker Mike Schultz has done a couple of interviews in which he said, attack the judge in the case. And we'll get to your question in a second on Twitch, because it's a related question. But House Speaker Mike Schultz has given a couple of interviews in which he says that he attacks the judge because of the lateness of the decision. It came out at like 11:49 p.m. right on the day of the deadline on November 10th, and they're saying they didn't have time to file an emergency appeal with the Supreme Court, and now they're looking at the deadlines because the lieutenant governor has said that the maps needed to be in place. She put a deadline of the 10th, and that's what the court adhered to. Ruling came out very late on the 10th. In state statute, it says the 15th. That's the date they have to transmit all the information about the data to the county clerks. And it sure as heck sounds like the legislature is trying to tamp down expectations about whether or not they will be able to overturn this decision, whether or not they'll be able to get an appeal in place. So I don't know if they're going to or not. I still don't think that this is over with, because the ultimate date is the day that candidates start filing for office, which is January 2nd. And we just saw that in the decision out of Texas that struck down their maps as a racial gerrymander. The maps that the Texas legislature passed earlier this year that created 5 more seats for Republicans to have a pickup opportunity. And this decision came out earlier this week. I think it was yesterday, actually. And the reason why is because the deadline for candidates to start filing for office in Texas is December 8th. And they wanted to get this decision out before then so that the maps would be in place and candidates would know where they were running. So this is not over by any sense of the imagination, because everyone talks about dates and date, but the real date is when candidates start filing for office. And that's January 2nd here in Utah. So that's the date you should be looking at. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court is most likely going to be taking up this decision out of Texas, and we don't know which way they're going to go on that. But that court did rule that it was an illegal racial gerrymander. So your guess is as good as mine. Are these maps going to stand? I don't know. We have to operate like they will, because that is the world that we live in right now. This is the map right now. the congressional map that was put in place by the judge. Our viewer on Twitch says, is the judge on the gerrymander case going to be impeached? As we've talked about before in the past, Republicans in the legislature certainly have the numbers to do that if they want. You need 2/3 vote in the House where articles of impeachment would be introduced, and they've got more than enough. That's 50 votes. There are 61 members of the Republican caucus in the House. And then there would be a trial in the Senate, and they have more than 2/3 in the Senate. I think you would need a majority in the Senate, but 2/3 in the Senate. So if the Republicans want to do that, they certainly have the numbers. The question is, will they be able to get 50 votes in the House for these articles of impeachment? Because I've told you before, they are not going to bring this issue to the floor for a vote unless they have those numbers locked down, which is how they operate on most of the controversial issues up on the Hill. Those are decided long before they ever get to the floor of the House or the Senate, or long before they even get to a committee. They are debated in the Republican caucuses in the House and the Senate, and those are closed to anyone except for House members. And so when people say that stuff is happening behind closed doors, they literally mean it. The big decisions are made behind closed doors. And then when it comes to the really big decisions, like budgetary decisions, really big spending decisions, those are made by a subset of the Republican group. It's the Republican leadership. So, is the judge going to be impeached? Well, they certainly have the numbers, but they won't bring that to the floor unless they know that they have the votes to do it. So if you see it scheduled for a floor vote, it's done. It's a fait accompli. They are not going to bring that thing to the floor and have it fail. That would be too embarrassing, especially for some of the leadership in the House who have their eyes on larger prizes, shall we say. One of the worst kept secrets in Utah is that House Speaker Mike Schultz is gearing up to run for governor in 2028. He's not going to allow this to come to the floor unless it has a bulletproof 2/3 vote. So is that going to happen? Again, if they want to do it, they can. I don't know if they will. On TikTok, can the public override an impeachment? Nope. No, you cannot. No, there are certain things that only the legislature can do. They're allowed to impeach judges. There is not a method for impeaching members of the legislature. They would have to expel one of their own. There's no recall measure, is what I meant to say. There's no way that the public can recall a member of the legislature. And if you want to do a constitutional amendment, too bad. Only the legislature can introduce a constitutional amendment. So the public cannot override an impeachment. There's a few other comments, trying to see if I missed anything here on TikTok. Please leave your comments in the chat. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you're thinking this evening. Once again, my website is utahpolitics.news. Question, is the Democratic caucus still open? Yes. Democratic caucus in both the House and the Senate. Occasionally they will close it, but yes, it's still open. Unfortunately, they don't make any decisions. They're not the ones, they don't really control anything. When it comes down to the budget deliberations, the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate, they hammer out the big parts of the budget, and then they let the Democrats know how much money they have to spend on their issues. That's pretty much their involvement. Years ago, the Democrats would spend a lot of time and effort on what they called an alternative budget. So they would come out with their own budget proposal, and it was interesting. The juice was not worth the squeeze at all, because they would get a little bit of attention for maybe, a day or two, maybe that. But at the end of the day, nothing that ever happened in their alternative budget ever was implemented. So they stopped doing that. Dank on YouTube says, have you personally seen any signature gatherers yet for the Utah GOP's Prop 4 repeal? No, I haven't. And I'm putting this out to the group tonight. Have you seen it anywhere? Have you seen any of those? Because I know that the Republicans officially kicked off their signature drive this week. And as I wrote a couple of days ago, and I hope you saw the story. If not, you can read it at utahpolitics.news. But that effort is being bankrolled by, let me pull this up here. It's being bankrolled by a dark money group that is deeply tied to Donald Trump and his political organization. There's a group called Securing American Greatness Incorporated. And at the end of October, they donated just over $1 million to the to Utahns for Representative Government. That's the political issues committee that is behind the GOP's Prop 4 repeal effort. And that's just the rules. If you're going to do a ballot initiative, if you're going to do a referendum, if you're going to do an indirect initiative, you have to have an organization, a political issues committee, and then you have to report your donations and your spending. And this organization, Securing American Greatness, donated, the amount was $1,087,500 to Utahns for Representative Government, which is the pick behind this organization. And that seems like a very specific number. Well, it's probably a down payment to execute the contract for professional signature gatherers. This is not a cheap proposition. Republicans have done everything they can after 2018, when technically 4 ballot initiatives qualified, but one of them, there was a huge push to get people to take their name off the ballot, and that's how they kept the Count My Vote initiative, which would have gotten rid of the caucus and convention system. That's how they kept that off the ballot. But technically 4 signature gathering efforts did get enough signatures initially to qualify for the ballot. 3 ultimately did, and they all passed. And after that, the Republican-controlled legislature has been doing whatever they can to make it more difficult to get to collect the signatures. And it's a pretty high bar you have to reach to get a ballot initiative on the ballot. You have to collect signatures equaling 8% of the active voters, or the people who cast a ballot in the last election, statewide. So that's about 140,000 signatures statewide. But you also have to hit that 8% threshold in 26 of the state's 29 Senate districts. Now, earlier this year, after the legislature passed the so-called union-busting bill, HB 267, which made it so that public sector labor unions could not collectively bargain on behalf of their members, clearly targeting the Utah Education Association. After the legislature passed that, there was an effort for a referendum to put it on the 2026 ballot. That has the signature gathering requirements for that were a little bit lower. They still had to hit the 8% statewide, so 140,000 signatures, but they had to also meet that 8% in just 15 of 29 state Senate districts. For a ballot initiative, you have a longer period of time to get those signatures. For the referendum, they had just 45 days after the end of the session. They crushed it. They got close to 300,000 signatures. I think the number was actually just north of 250,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. But they only had 45 days to do it. For this effort, they've got a longer period of time. They have until February 15th to collect those signatures, but it's still going to cost a lot of money. For the referendum effort, which used paid signature gatherers, it cost $1.5 million. And the reason why it costs so much is because some of the restrictions that the legislature put in place to stop these sorts of things, to make it harder to put a ballot initiative on the ballot, to qualify a ballot initiative. And one of them is the way that paid signature gatherers can be paid. If you are collecting signatures for a referendum or a ballot initiative, you can only be paid by the hour. Instead of paying signature gatherers by the number of signatures that they get, it can only be hourly. So that means you have to hire a lot more people to go out and gather signatures for you. Now that prohibition on paying per signature does not count for political candidates, which is rather convenient. But the legislature has made this more difficult. And now the Republican Party has to grapple with that, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And it sounds like they've got a lot of outside money coming into the state to fund that effort. Just over $1 million to get this thing off the ground. When they thought they were going to do an indirect initiative, they had a lower signature goal, but a tighter timeline, and they had put out a call for signature gatherers, and they were going to pay them, I believe, $40 an hour, plus travel come from out of state. This is going to cost a lot of money. I suspect that they'll come close. If they don't get enough signatures, they'll come closer than any other initiative that we've had since 2018. There have been a few of them, mostly filed by the Phil Lyman crowd targeting ballot stuff. Those haven't come anywhere close. Nathan Detroit says, do signers have to be active voters or just registered voters? You have to be a registered voter. The active voter is a number that just sets the threshold. Active voters are people who have voted, I think, in the last two elections or within the last two election cycles, the last two general elections, not the municipal elections, but the even year elections. So anyone who's voted within those two is considered an active voter. But it's based on the number of voters who voted in the last, I think, presidential election, and it's 8% statewide, and that number this year is 140,000. David Pruitt had the same question. They have to verify the signatures of those of actual registered voters. Yes, they have to be registered voters. You can register to vote at the same time you sign the petition. So you will see a lot of that. There's a lot of conjunction. And these operations are fairly sophisticated. They will have apps that they can connect to a database to determine whether or not the person who's signing the initiative, signing the ballot petition, is a registered voter or not. And then they can offer to have them register right there. So it's a fairly sophisticated operation. So they'll know when they do that, and they'll also know whether you're in the right Senate district, because that's also a big key to this. And you have to, and 140,000 isn't your goal. You probably need to be 10 to 20% above that, just in case, because signatures are going to get thrown out. And they're cracking down on signature verification and those standards after a couple of audits that came out through the Lieutenant Governor's office, talking about there's really no standardized way to verify signatures. Again, driven mostly by the Phil Lyman election denial crowd. SJ on TikTok says, sent you a DM on Facebook, watching another live, and you got mentioned. I'm pretty sure I know who that was. I'll read your DM in a minute, but I got you, SJ, and I'm pretty sure I know who you're talking about. Let's see, over onto Twitch. There has been restrictions on the press at the legislature. What will this be like at the next session? Well, we can talk about that because the restrictions on the press are mostly targeted at yours truly. That's why I am suing in federal court, because I was denied a press credential after I launched Utah Political Watch, the independent, my independent publication. And right after that happened, the legislature changed their rules to say that independent journalists, bloggers, whatever, are not allowed to have press credentials. And so I sued. My case was dismissed in Utah District Court. We have appealed to the 10th Circuit Court. We have filed that our appeal. And just this last week, a couple of amicus briefs in support of my case came in. One came in from the ACLU of Utah. The other one was authored by representatives for fire, freedom, and individual. I can't remember what fire.org stands for, and the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. And they're both quite good. I've been meaning to post them online. I put them in our Discord chat. I think they're very good, but there's a couple in there. There's a couple of things. Let me bring up some of it because I found it very, very fascinating. Okay, I'm gonna have to. Oh crap! I have so much open on my desktop. It's nuts. But such is the life of a reporter. I'll get to that in a second. Dank says, I haven't seen any signature gatherers for the Utah GOP's petition effort, but my eyes are definitely up. But they are around. I'm keeping my eyes open. Yeah, I haven't seen them yet. I'm sure that they're going to be targeting a number of places. If you think back to the referendum, not this time, but the one targeting the tax reform in 2019, and that one worked because they were raising sales taxes on groceries, and they got permission from the operators of Harmon's grocery stores to set up inside of their stores, and they got a ton of signatures. So if they can work some sort of deal out like that, where they're able to collect signatures in high traffic places, that will help them out immensely. But with $1 million coming into their coffers from this outside group, and I haven't even talked about who this outside group is. This group, Securing American Greatness, they are a dark money group. What does that mean? Well, they are a nonprofit. They have organized themselves as a 501c4. And that means they do not have to disclose their donors, being a nonprofit. They can do electioneering, but they can't specifically advocate for or against a candidate, right? They can't say, even though they boosted Donald Trump's efforts during the 2024 election, they didn't run ads saying vote for Donald Trump. They're not allowed to do that, but they can raise issues ads. And they first popped up in 2024 when they started running ads in Pennsylvania attacking Joe Biden over inflation. And that cost about $2 million. And then right at the end of the 2024 campaign, this organization, Securing American Greatness, donated $62 million to Donald Trump's PAC, Make America Great Again Incorporated, the MAGA Incorporated. That was his super PAC. And that's $62 million from an organization that does not have to disclose its donors. And that's why they call it dark money. And now that same organization, which is run by a gentleman by the name of Tyler Budowich, who was the assistant communications director for the White House under this Trump administration. He left the Trump White House in September, but he came in with Trump after he was inaugurated. This is his organization, and he just put $1 million into this effort in Utah. And I find that interesting because one of the things that you hear up on Capitol Hill from the Republican lawmakers is they do not like ballot initiatives because you're going to have a lot of quote unquote outside money flowing into the state, pouring into the state, and trying to go against Utah values. Well, this is a crap ton of outside money. This is $1 million for a signature gathering effort. And it's not from Utah. And we don't know who the donors are. They don't have to disclose that. We'll likely never know who their donors are. But there's $1 million that just, boom, right there. And I'm sure that this organization will give more if needed. But I'm 100% convinced that this first round of money is to kick off the signature gathering effort. So when you hear lawmakers talking about outside money coming in from out of state, these, ideological groups trying to run ballot initiatives, that's exactly what's happening here. 100%. That is what is happening here right now. But if you expect them to see the irony behind that, I think you're going to be waiting a long time. Just trying to look and see what we have here. Nothing new on TikTok. Okay, so back to the press restrictions. As I said, I have been suing the Utah legislature in federal court. We're expecting the reply from the legislature first part of December. I think their deadline to apply is in December. We're asking the court, my lawyers have pointed out or making the argument that the district court's decision was wrong when they dismissed my case, and they want them to remand it back to the back to the Utah Circuit, and also to give a preliminary injunction so that I can have a press pass for this upcoming session, because I'm pretty sure that they're going to deny me again. But, and as I'm going to open these, I'll need to open up my Acrobat. Sorry, I'm opening these up online. FIRE is the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. They used to be mostly concerned with stuff on campus, but now they're more of a First Amendment group. So they were one of the two amicus briefs filed on my behalf, and then the other one was from the ACLU. And the ACLU one I thought was particularly good because it has been, it makes a point that I have been concerned about for a long time, and I had been warning my colleagues up on the Hill that something like this was going to happen eventually. And it is this, that the legislature gets to decide who is a reporter and who is not a reporter. Their credentialing system. After I sued, and this is a great thing that the legislature does. They make these decisions and then they come up with reasoning and justifications after the fact, known as post hoc. They're the post hoc legislature. They did it in the redistricting case. Came up with a lot of justifications after they got sued. But one of the reasonings they came up with for saying that blogs, independent media cannot have a press pass is that they want to make sure that the press corps maintains a sense of professionalism. That's not their job. That's not their decision. If the government is deciding who is a legitimate member of the media and who is not, brother, you got some trouble, because that's not their job. That's essentially the government licensing journalists, which goes against the entire First Amendment. You can't do that. But essentially, with these standards to get a media credential, only allowing for journalists who work for established outlets like legacy news outlets, corporate news outlets, you're creating a license. And another part of our argument is that what happened to me will have a chilling effect. You better believe it'll have a chilling effect. You better believe that if the legislature, and it says right in the standards that they can revoke this credential for any reason, you better believe that people, our contention is I write things that they don't like. I write things that make them angry, and that's why they wanted to show me who's boss. That's what came out in a recording that I got, and I'm sure that you saw that on my website, and if not, it's there, where someone on a field trip recorded Senator Todd Weiler saying the reason why the legislature didn't give me a pass is because they wanted to show me who's boss. And you better believe that the other members of the press corps saw that, and they're going to tread lightly. And that does not serve the public interest. It serves the legislature's interest, but not the public's interest. Question from Twitch. May I get a press pass as an amateur journalist? I don't make that decision. The legislature does. You're certainly welcome to apply, I guess. And that was one of the things during this whole process that was puzzling to me. They forced us to go through sworn depositions. Just an annoyance tactic. I had to sit for a sworn deposition. They're media representatives. But what was fascinating in the middle of those, during those sworn depositions, they claimed over and over and over again that these revised media credential guidelines were designed so that there was no discretion. There would be a bright line. Do you want a press pass? Do you meet this criteria, boom, 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 right? But when they were questioned by my lawyers, and they brought up certain scenarios, their answers basically said it was all discretion. One example that stood out, my lawyers brought up Tucker Carlson, independent journalist, independent. He has his own website. One of the things that they complained about was that I don't have a full-time editor. Tucker Carlson doesn't have a full-time editor. So we asked, would Tucker Carlson be able to get a press pass to cover the legislature? Now, under their guidelines, the answer should be no. Should be 100% no. If there is a bright line removing all discretion from this, the answer should be no. Tucker Carlson is an independent journalist. He's not allowed to have a press pass. But what did they say in a sworn deposition? It would depend. They would have to do more consultation. Have to consider the facts more. But they claim that this new press policy was designed to remove all discretion. Just flow chart, easy peasy. You figure out, do you click off these boxes? Yes, you can have a press pass. These boxes, no, you could not have a press pass. Every single time we tried to nail them down on who could have a press pass, who couldn't, they could not answer. So anyway, that case is still pending. We have filed our appeal with the 10th Circuit in Denver. 2 amicus briefs came in. I'll post those online. They're really great. You should take some time to read it because it really talks a lot about the importance of a free press, the importance of an independent press, especially right now in this moment we're having in this country. And the legislature's response is due December 10th. Let me try to get to some of the other questions here. Solar says, who might enter the CD1 race? Well, that's interesting. I'm sure you saw all the reporting, and I did a little follow-up on it, but there was all the reporting that Ben McAdams raised $500,000 in his first day after officially declaring that he was in the race. And that's a big amount of money. To give you an idea of how much money that is for Utah, that in one day, Ben McAdams raised more than every Democratic candidate for Congress who ran in 2024 and 2022 combined. Their combined total was just over $450,000. Kathleen Reeby did raise more. She was in the special election after Chris Stewart stepped down in 2023. She raised over $325,000. But if you look at the regular election cycles, that $500,000 is a lot of money. And it does a number of things. Let me take a drink here first. What it does is it confers a sense of legitimacy. There's a reason why they send out these big press releases. We raised this amount of money, showing grassroots reports, but what it does is it helps a candidate give a sense of legitimacy, because donors tend to give money to candidates they think that they can win. That's how this works. And campaign cash, like it or not, it is the lifeblood of politics. Dave Hansen, longtime Politico here in Utah. He ran Orrin Hatch's campaigns for Senate, ran Mia Love's 2 campaigns for Congress, or ran her campaigns for Congress. And he told me once that he said, money, campaign money, having it and not having it is the difference between running the kind of campaign you want to run and the kind of campaign you are forced to run. So it's a lot of money, and having money is a huge advantage. There have been studies that showed incumbents or candidates who raise the most money win 90 to 95% of the time. Now, once you get above, like in most congressional races, if you get to $1 million, there's not much difference between $1 million and $10 million when it comes to the amount of money. There's only so many ads you can spend. There's only so many mailers you can send. But that's a lot of money in what is expected to be a crowded primary field. But it also has a psychological thing, because it could scare off some candidates from jumping into the race, knowing that McAdams already has a massive cash advantage, and he's been on the campaign trail for less than a week. Now, Kathleen Reeby has already declared that she's running. Curiously enough, she has not filed paperwork with the Federal Election Commission yet, so she can't raise money until she does that. I get an alert whenever there's a new candidate who files paperwork with the FEC, and it wouldn't be through her old committee, because that committee, she sent a termination report. She shut it down after she lost. And so she has not filed that paperwork yet. I'm sure she will, but time's a ticking. We've got the Democratic convention is on April 25th. What is that? 157 days away. And the primary election is on June 23rd. That's 216 days from now. Time is ticking, and you got to raise your money. You got to get your campaign stuff in place, and getting your campaign in place costs money. So you really can't do that. I mean, you really can't delay when things are going to move this quickly. This is going to be a very quick campaign if the maps stand. Stephen Birch says, just joined, back from DC after a quick visit to speak at a solar conference. Did I miss anything interesting about D4? No, we haven't talked about D4 yet. We've just been talking about whether the maps would stand or not, and freedom of the press and dark money in Utah politics. Salar says, I feel like Caroline Gleick is very different from Reeby and McAdams and could bring some sort of contrast to the race. Possibly. As we talked about last time, there are some lanes for people to run in. McAdams, with that huge cash haul, pretty much has taken the, I would say, moderate Democrat center right, center left Democrat. Um, that's his lane now. And given the fact that he used to be in Congress, and I think with his name recognition, he's almost he's kind of got this the air of an incumbent around him, at least psychologically, you know. Gleiss ran for U.S. Senate last year, 2024, against John Curtis. Can she raise some money? Because, again, there's signature gathering, and that costs money. They'll need to get 7,000 signatures. McAdams, 100% is going to get signatures because he, as we've discussed, he's got some members of the Democratic Party, delegates who are not happy with him for his role in the Evan McMullin thing. I've talked to people close to McAdams. They think that he'll be okay, but they acknowledge that it's going to be a bruising fight at convention. So he will get signatures. So this fight will not be over at the convention. It will continue on beyond that into the primary, which you're going to need money for. I'll be interested to see where McAdams' money came from and who's giving it and who's maxed out. Right at the beginning of a campaign, that's a low-hanging fruit, right? So you can get your friends, your family, your business associates to give you money. After that, it's a lot harder to raise money. But it will be interesting to see when McAdams has to report, and we'll see that in January. I think we'll see it January 15th. That'll be the deadline for them to give out their FEC reports, and we'll have a better idea of where his money is coming from. Because when campaigns send out these splashy press releases, I always like to ask, hey, can you give me the breakdown? What was the average donation? Where did it come from? How many donors? They don't want to tell me that because it ruins the narrative that they're trying to set. It's called earned media, and they're trying to get, that's why they send the press release out. I always try to find a way to write it in with a different matter. And I think it's very interesting just what that amount of money does. Now, campaigns try to set the narrative with this. We saw it in 2024 with Brad Wilson. Brad Wilson, former House Speaker running for U.S. Senate as a Republican, came out of the gate with a huge fundraising total. We learned that at the end of the day, he loaned his campaign $3 million in a losing effort. But a lot of that was manipulating things to make things look better than it was. I remember in his second fundraising quarter, he had a big press release that said he had raised $1 million for the second straight quarter. I kind of held off on that story. I didn't buy it. I was curious as to where that money was coming from, and they weren't giving me any details. And then a few weeks later, when he actually had to file his report, we found out what happened. On the very last day of the campaign finance period, of the reporting period, he loaned his campaign $600,000 so they could get over the 1 million mark. He really only pulled in about $400,000 in donations for that quarter, but it sounds better if you have $1 million. They just didn't tell anyone that 600,000 of it came from his own pocket. And by the time I wrote that story, which was the truth, they had actually gotten the narrative that they wanted, that Wilson had raised another $1 million. So be very careful when these press releases come out. Yes, I wrote about it, but I wrote about it, I think, in such a way that it was the facts of the story, because they can't say they raised $500,000 and then didn't. But I tried to add a little more perspective about what that meant. That's an astronomical amount of money in Democratic politics here in Utah. That is a lot of cash when you're a Democrat. Republican, Let's see what else we have here. Solar says, have you heard anything new about an appeal of the Gibson ruling? As we started, no. It's really weird. that Republicans, it feels like they're trying to set expectations that they're not going to be able to appeal it. I still don't think that we're out of the woods yet. The date that I have always said that we need to be aware of is January 2nd. That is the date that I think is when they can't do anything else about that. That is the date when there cannot be an appeal. Or that is a date where it'll be very hard for a court to step in because candidates will have started filing for office. Look at what happened in Texas when a judge threw out their maps this week. The reason why they put that ruling out was so they wanted to get it out ahead of the December 8th candidate filing period. And by the way, go read Kyle Cheney's stuff on Twitter and in Politico. It was a 2-1 decision in a district court that threw out those maps in Texas. And one of the judges, the judge who voted to keep the maps in place, put out a blistering dissent where he personally attacked the plaintiffs, the other judges on the panel, blamed George Soros, attacked Gavin Newsom. It's a wild ride. It's unlike, Kyle Cheney did a great job writing about this in Politico, and you should go look that story up. But it is a wild story. Leave your questions, your comments in the chat. Love to hear from you. From Twitch, what campaign contributions are or are not required to be recorded to the FEC? All of them. Anything that is given to a candidate, you have to disclose. And there are limits. I think it's $3,900 per cycle per candidate. And in Utah, we actually have 3 cycles. So you can give the max. A person can give the max donation. It might be $4,000 now. I think they raised that. But the max donation, the last time around, it was $3,900 per person per cycle. And we have 3 campaign cycles in Utah. We have the convention cycle, we have the primary cycle, and then the general elections. Those are 3 cycles you can max out 3 times. Now, if you give to someone during the convention and they don't have a convention challenger, and they don't have to spend money on the convention, then they have to reallocate that money. Burgess Owens got in a lot of trouble for that. Mia Love got in trouble for that because they took in essentially illegal campaign donations because I believe Owens was, I know Love was taking them in Love was raising money for the convention fight, but she didn't have a challenger in 2018. And they had to, I believe, reallocate those or refund them. What you have to do is you have to contact the donor and say, hey, do you want this money back, or can we put it forward to a future campaign cycle? They just can't use it. The problem was Love, I think, had already spent that money when it came down. And then Owens, I think his was along the same lines. I'll have to look that one up. But yes, you have to you have to disclose everything if you're a candidate. There are limits on how much you can give a candidate. In Utah, you do have to disclose, but there are no limits. You can give as much money to anybody. And that's why you see $10,000, $50,000 donations going to Governor Cox's fundraising PAC and his gala fundraising dinner. This is a lot of money. Oh, Jay McFarland, J-Mac, he ran for Congress a couple of times. I think once as a Democrat and then once, I think you were an independent, J-Mac? Anyway, he was a congressional candidate a couple of times here in Utah. He says, maybe I should step in and run against Ben McAdams. There's no way I could raise $500,000 though. That's what I'm saying. If you're not a Republican, it's very hard to raise money. And when Ben McAdams' names first started coming up in conjunction with that first district, that's the first thing that again, money is equated to legitimacy. Donors give money to candidates they think that can win. They think can win. And it's a self-spinning wheel. You raise the money and it looks like you're going to win, so then you attract more money. And then more money brings in more money. And that leaves other candidates out in the cold because they're unable to raise that amount of money. Is it fair? No. It's the system, though. And it really leaves a lot of candidates who can't raise that amount of money. I mean, unless you have your own personal wealth. Representative Mike Kennedy spent, I believe it was $600,000 on his run in 2018 for U.S. Senate. That was his own money. And then I think he pumped another couple $100,000 into his House race last year. That's why he's probably not happy about these new maps. Unless if he's in the same district as Celeste Malloy, does he primary her? Interesting article in Politico today, talking with the Republicans in Congress. Someone's going to be the odd man out. Of the 4 Republicans in Congress, in the House here in Utah, someone's going to be the odd man out. Somebody is going to have to be the person who runs in that first district. Although, I think if these maps remain in place, Burgess Owens is going to retire. But again, now there's not a lot of time for another Republican to step up. I'm surprised that we have not seen Republicans who might be ambitious start to, at least I haven't heard about this. I'm sure there are people who are trying to look at it, but you don't want to upset, you don't want to upset Owens, who is the longest, he and more, the longest tenured members of the Utah House. You don't upset him by, looking like you're going to push him out of the way. That was one of the reasons why Brad Wilson got sideways with Mitt Romney in 2024. Romney's people, and I know this because I spoke to people close to Romney, they felt like Wilson was trying to push him out of the way. Romney wanted to announce on his own terms that he was not going to run again. And they felt Wilson was trying to push him out of the way with some of his actions. And they did not like that. And they let Brad Wilson know about it. And other things happened that I really can't talk about right now. Maybe someday. But there were other things that happened behind the scenes because of Romney's displeasure with Wilson. It felt like he was trying to push him out of the way. And you don't want to look like you're the guy trying to push Burgess Owens out of the way. But until he makes that decision, he is going to run. And you would think that, maybe he runs in the 4th district, which is the one from the southwestern portion of Salt Lake County and Tooele County. I think it has parts of, I don't know if it has the Utah County in there or not. I can't remember. But you don't want to be the guy who pushes him out. That's a good way to get sideways with the Republican establishment here, and you're going to need them. So everybody's waiting to see what he's going to do. But there's been talk that Kennedy might primary Celeste Malloy. Blake Moore will probably run in the 2nd district, which is the northern part of the state. That makes sense. He's from the Ogden. He's from the Logan. Anyway, he doesn't live in the district he represents now, or he does now, but he didn't when he first ran. But that's not a requirement. But they'll get together and they'll decide. But if I were a betting man, and I'm not, but if I were, I would bet money that the odd man out would be Owens, which is surprising because he's got tenure over Kennedy and Malloy. He almost was the chair of the House Education Committee. Almost got that job, so he's got a lot of support in the House, so it would be surprising. On one level, it would be surprising if he steps aside. The other level, not so surprising because he'd be 78 at the end of his next term. Stephen Burt, who is running for the Democratic nomination in District 4 on Instagram, says that would be novel. Owens lives in D4. He seems to like running where he doesn't live. Yeah, he does not live in the 4th district now. He lives in the 3rd. I don't think he's ever... He might have lived in the district when he first ran in 2020, but he does not live there now. He's like right outside the boundaries by a mile or two. But in Utah, that's something that people don't really seem to care about. Jason Chaffetz, when he first got elected to Congress, he did not live in his district. There was a Democrat who was running against Chaffetz, Bo Babka, former Salt Lake County sheriff. He ran against Chaffetz one year. He did not live in the district. When Chaffetz was first elected and did not live in his district, it was a big deal because he was only the third member of Congress to ever live outside the district to live outside of the district that he represents. Now it's not a big deal. Now there's like 20 some members of Congress who don't live in their own district. Stephen Burt, correction. He says he's running as unaffiliated but seeking the Democrats' support. Dev says, how can I get in touch with you? I'm a progressive running to flip Provo, House District 62. I'd love to collab. I can't collab with you. I'm a journalist. That's not what I do. I can cover, but I don't work with candidates. I'm a journalist. I'm an independent journalist. I've covered Utah politics for more than 25 years. I have a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge about this, but I can't act as anybody's campaign advisor. I just can't. That's not my role. That's not my job. I wish you luck, though. Jay McFarland says, I moved to the 4th District because I thought it was the right thing to do. Do you live in the 4th District under the new map or under the old map? That's the question. Someone says, reach out to Elevate. Dev message says, reach out to Elevate Utah for that help. Yeah, they're a left-leaning PAC. And they support candidates. Stephen Burt says reps should live in the district they represent. Basic expectation. Well, yeah, but nobody seems to care. That's the thing. When people get mad at what this has been absolutely baffling to me. As someone who has been covering Utah politics as long as I have. You would think that voters would get mad about things like that. They don't live in the district. The legislature tried to rig the game. You know, they repealed Prop 4 and then they tried to get Constitutional Amendment D on the ballot and got slapped down. And you would think that voters would get mad about that, but they don't. They have not been punished for that at all. Voters have not punished it. So when you hear, voters just don't care. That's why they keep doing it. The legislature has not been punished for essentially for actually repealing 3 voter-passed initiatives. They changed Prop 4, they changed medical cannabis, they changed Medicaid expansion, made significant changes to those bills that were approved by the voters. Nobody cares. And maybe it's the tribal nature of our politics. But it is astonishing to me that nobody cares, that they have not suffered any electoral consequences for it. So that's why they continue to do it. Nobody punishes them. And that's also instructive as to why they react so strongly when a court says no. When the Utah Supreme Court said no to them over Amendment D and Amendment A, they got really mad and they went in and tried to change the way that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is selected. They finally got that change through in the special session. When the court ruled that they overstepped their bounds by repealing Prop 4, they reacted extremely strongly. When the court did not pick their map, which clearly violated Prop 4, but they had changed the law so that it didn't violate Prop 4, and a map that didn't violate Prop 4 would actually violate Prop 4, and the judge said no, they got extremely mad. They're not used to being told no and suffering a consequence for it because they don't suffer those consequences at the ballot box. Now, some of that is because of the fact that the legislature is so insanely gerrymandered in some areas of the state. In some parts of the state, it's so overwhelmingly Republican, it's hard to gerrymander. But there are parts of the state that are very gerrymandered. Salt Lake County. And why do you think that when they passed that bill, SB 1011, that sets standards for the judges to evaluate a map to see if it passed a partisan fairness measure, they said only Congress, not the legislature, because they know if they tried to do that with the legislature, their maps would be thrown out. They're not used to being told no because they don't suffer any consequences for it. On Twitch, and I believe your name is Reed, if I'm not mistaken, Reed, but Reed Ludlazander, I think is who it is. Anyway, you said, I once read in 2009 that Utah had the weakest campaign finance laws in the country. Is that still true? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They have reformed some of the... Yeah, I was right. It is Reed. Hi there, Reed. Welcome. Yes, we do have I don't know if it's the weakest campaign finance laws or just the most lax campaign finance laws. They have tightened them up. They have changed what you could spend them on, because in the past, lawmakers could pretty much spend it on almost anything. They've changed that some. But for the most part, they're extremely lax campaign finance laws. Not only in just the campaign finance, allowed to take any size donation for anybody, but also the reporting. If you're not running for office, if you're a member of the U.S. The state Senate, and you don't have an election coming up this year, well, all members of the legislature, since they did not face an election, they only have to report their expenditures one time, and that's at the end of the year. So we'll only get a look at what they did for the entire year once. Now, they'll have to report more during an election year, but in off years, they don't have to report, except for one time. Nathan Detroit on YouTube, is there a worry about appearing to be disloyal to the Republican Party if a candidate announces for a district they claim is unconstitutional? I don't think so, because... Again, we have to live in this world where the map that the judge put in place is the map until it's not the map, right? So it's the map. And again, I'm feeling like Dora the Explorer, but it is the map. That's the map that we have to work with. That's the map that everybody's going to have to use unless a court steps in. And I think that could happen at any time before January 2nd. And, lawmakers have moved filing deadlines and election dates before. Remember, they did it in 2023 after Chris Stewart stepped down, and they wanted to make sure that his replacement was in place as soon as possible. So they pushed the general election back 2 weeks so they could make everything fit with the election calendar. It'd be much harder to do it for every election in 2026, but I suppose that they could do it. But again, that's the map right now. It's a map we have to deal with. Jay McFarland says, keep up the good work, gotta run. Nice to hear from you, Jay. It's been a while. Hope you're doing well. Well, we've been going for more than an hour here. Anybody else have anything else left to talk about? Let me see what else is on my rundown. We talked about the dark money group that's funding the signature gathering effort by the Utah GOP. Again, they don't have to disclose their donors. I don't know if we talked about this on the live stream, but I did write this late last week. I wrote it in the subscriber-only newsletter late last week. If you missed that, I'm sure you caught it when they wrote it in the Salt Lake Tribune a few days later. But, the first district, there's been a lot of people who are advocating for a a progressive candidate, a more left-leaning candidate. And I don't know if that would work given the makeup of this district, because even though it is D plus 14, which is a much more, which is extremely unusual given what's happened in the past in Utah politics. D plus 14. It is not a Democratic majority district. I pulled the voter registration numbers from L2, which is a voter database. They kindly give me access to their data for stories like this. But the largest block of registered voters in the boundaries of this new district are Republicans. They're only 35%. In the other three districts on this new map, they are over 50%. But in this one, they're only 35%. Independents are 33%. Democrats right around 25%. And it just goes back to the equation that has traditionally held for Democrats. If you want to win a race like this, you have to get all the Democratic vote. You have to get a significant number of the independent vote, and you have to get Republicans to cross over. Now, you could, if a Democrat were able to get all the Democratic vote and all the independent vote, they wouldn't need the Republicans. But that does not happen in the real world. That happens theoretically. So Democrats will need a candidate who can attract at least some Republicans to cross over. That's how Jim Matheson won. That's how Ben McAdams won. Now, I don't know if you saw the Marist poll that came out, I think it was today or yesterday, about the generic congressional ballot. And Democrats had 50 on the generic congressional ballot, asking respondents, if the election were today, which party would you vote for in Congress? Democrats led Republicans 55-41. That's a huge gap. That's a 14-point gap. That's Democratic wave territory. And when you get a Democratic wave, districts like this become extremely easy for Democrats. But you can't count on that, right? And that's the reason why I had Republicans telling me that they felt that the legislature got extremely lucky that the judge did not pick their map, because their map had two competitive districts. One was R+6, one was R+2. And if you get a Democratic wave election, all of a sudden, R+2 and R+6, those are the kinds of districts that flip. And that's why I had veteran Republican campaign operatives telling me that they felt the legislature was extremely lucky that the judge did not pick their map. Because if that map was in place, and you look at what's going on with the generic congressional ballot and all the trends that we're seeing, it screams Democratic wave. Now, as I've cautioned in the past, that's a year away. And a lot can happen between now and then. But as it stands right now, Democrats are in a very good spot. Let's see. Do you see Utah shifting to the left in the near future? I don't think so. Utah is a Republican state. Didn't used to be. But I don't see that happening. Now, there are demographic changes that are happening. And I see, that's why I think that this map that the judge picked, while it does give a Democratic advantage, it's much more fair than the map it replaced. It's really fair compared to the map it replaced. Now, you hear Republicans say Democrats only make up 13% of the voters in the states, and when they want 25% of the representation. How is that fair? Well, Republicans only make up 50%. And they want 100% of the representation in Congress. How is that fair? The key is the Democratic vote. And as I wrote a while ago, and you should go read this article on utahpolitics.news, because I'm pretty proud of this. I it took me a long time to break this down, but what they did when they drew the map in 2021 is they divided voters who cast a ballot for Joe Biden almost equally among the 4 congressional districts. And that's important because Joe Biden, given Donald Trump's, given the fact that Utah is not like the biggest MAGA state in the union, given the fact that there are Republicans who voted for Joe Biden, that was the perfect way to find those Republicans who are willing to cross the aisle. That is the way to find those independents who cross the aisle. And it took me forever to break this down, but I'm pretty confident this is what they did. They took all of the voters who cast a ballot for Joe Biden and almost equally divided them among the 4 congressional districts under the old map. And that was the way that they could weed out those voters who would be willing to cast a ballot for a Democratic candidate. The data was right there. Now, what they did was they dialed down those voters, the number of those voters in the 4th district, because that one was a little iffy. It changed hands 4 times in 5 elections between 2012 and 2020. But after that, they made that a rock solid district. So that's what they did. So if you don't believe me that a Democratic candidate needs crossover vote from Republicans, just look at what the Republican-controlled legislature did to gerrymander the congressional map. They went and divided the voters who cast a ballot for Joe Biden almost evenly among the 4 seats because the data was right there, and that showed them which Republicans, independents are willing to cast a ballot for a Democratic candidate. That's what they did. And if you want to find that article, it is on my website, utahpolitics.news. Nobody else had that kind of analysis. Nobody else figured that out. And I'm not a math guy, so that was a lot of work for me. So that's why I'm extremely proud of that piece. Because I think it demonstrates just how they gerrymandered the state, the congressional map in 2021. Stephen Burt says, yes, the state, 30% of the state is unaffiliated. So if you really wanted to break things down, you should have 2 seats that are solid Republican, and then a seat that would vote for an unaffiliated, and then a seat that would be, lean Democratic a little bit, but give the minor parties a chance. So that argument that only Democrats only make up 13% of the state, which I know I've written to illustrate a point, but if you're using that to justify the maps, it's a stupid argument. It's stupid. Anyway, let's see. Another question on TikTok. Edienberg says, how are Senator Kathleen Reeby's chances versus McAdams? That will be an interesting race. As I said earlier, she still has not filed her paperwork to run for the FEC, so she can't raise money yet. And McAdams pulled in $500,000 on his first day as an official candidate. Now, yes, he did have some PACs beating the bushes for him, but that's still an impressive amount of money. And Reeby has not even started the process yet, which is concerning because we've got 156 some days until the Democratic convention. So there's not a lot of time. We've got 216 days until the Democratic primary. And this campaign is going to go through the primary because you'll see McAdams gather signatures, and I suspect that Reeby will try to do the same. And she's going to need money to do that, and she hasn't even started that process yet. So that would be concerning to me if I were one of her supporters as to why they haven't filed that paperwork yet. Solar says, do you think Reeby receives any endorsements? Yeah, sure. Yeah, she'll get endorsements. That's yeah. I mean, yeah, she will get endorsements. McAdams had a little bit of a hiccup because he claimed that some member of, I think, the Salt Lake City Council endorsed him, and they said that they didn't. That happens every cycle, but it's still kind of embarrassing. Not a good look. Reed on Twitch says, do you think the McAdams will get a more progressive challenger in the primary? Oh, for sure. The primary depends. Convention, absolutely. Yeah, you'll see you'll see a progressive candidate, and there's a lane for maybe one or two of them. It's going to be hard because I don't know how that candidate. I mean, you have to wonder what kind of campaign that they're going to run. If you hear I've been doing this for a long time. When you hear candidates say, well, we're going to rely on social media and really work on the grassroots. Yeah, that's important, but that's not the whole thing, and you need a lot more. You need a more robust campaign operation. You just do. It might be enough to get you out of convention, but once you get to the primary, it doesn't work. I mean, just look at how many Republican candidates have gotten through the convention only to get stomped in the primary, either because they ran out of money or they don't have wide appeal. It just doesn't happen. And the Democratic primary is open. Anybody can vote in the Democratic primary as long as you don't cast a ballot in the Republican primary. So you can vote. If you are a member of the GOP and you want to vote in the Democratic primary, you can. But you can't vote in the Republican primary. That's the only rule. For the Republican primary, you have to be a registered member of the Republican Party. And you'll probably have to request the ballot you want. So I think a progressive candidate might be able to get out of convention, but once they get to the primary, it's a whole nother ballgame. Because then you're having to appeal. You have to retool your campaign. And a lot of times you run out of money. Jonathan Johnson, the former chairman of Overstock.com, who ran for governor as a Republican in 2016, he actually came really close to Gary Herbert in the convention. And he had some momentum coming out of convention, right? But he ran out of money because the chair, Patrick Byrne, the chairman of Overstock, wouldn't write him any more checks. He was funding his entire campaign, and he wouldn't write him any more checks. They ran out of money, and all of his momentum coming out of convention just stalled. And Herbert had tons of money, bought a bunch of ads, and just stomped him. And that's usually what happens. A couple of people are asking, what about Nate Bluin, State Senator Nate Bluin? Well, if he does decide to run, he has to give up his seat in the state Senate because he's up for election. If Nate Bluin decides to run for Congress, he will have to give up his seat in the state Senate. For Reby, it's a freebie because she just got reelected. So she can run and not give up her seat. But Bluin would have to give up his seat if he decides to run. So that's probably what he's weighing. Let's see, what else do we have here? As we're getting close to the end. Been going for almost an hour and a half here. This has been a lot of fun. I really enjoy this. You guys have some great questions. This is a lot of fun for me. And I enjoy doing this. Let's see. I hear a lot of opinions on nuclear power. What are your thoughts on the proposed plant in Brigham City? We got to do something. We have to do something to address power needs. Lawmakers are really freaked out about the power situation here in Utah. And that's a solution. I don't know if they're going to be able to get this thing through the regulatory process. I'm sure the Trump administration is going to be much more accommodating and help shepherd that through. But I do know that Republicans up on the Hill are freaked out about the power situation in the future. The state is not going to have enough power. We're not going to be able to generate enough power to meet demand. It's just we just don't have that kind of capacity, and they want to attract AI data centers here, and that chews up a lot more power. So they're very worried about this. What do they do about it? It's above my pay grade. But I expect them. This has been part of a large push, and it's going to continue to be part of a larger push because they got to do something. Okay, my throat's about to give out. I'm about done for the night. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thanks for joining me. Did you know we do this for our subscribers? That's right. We have subscriber-only live streams, something we just started doing, where subscribers get to come on a private feed, ask me questions. They can actually join in. They can call in and interact on the live stream. That's for paid subscribers at utahpolitics.news. You can get in on that for $5 a month. Actually, right now, if you want to become a new subscriber, I'll give you an extra 10% off. That's, normally it's $55 a year. I'm offering a 10% discount for new subscribers right now. $49.50 for a year. If you sign up for a year, you get subscriber-only newsletters. I'll send you some stickers. You get to participate in the subscriber-only live streams that we've done a couple of them. They've been really fun. I'm hoping to do more of those. And you can join our Discord. It's starting to get fun. It's, we're getting more and more subscribers to join us in Discord, and we're having some good discussions. We were talking about that great show on Apple Plus, Pluribus. Nathan Detroit, who's watching on YouTube, had to slap me down because I was putting out spoilers. And I appreciate it, but the show's so good, Nathan. It's so good. How can you not talk about it? I can't stop thinking about that show. It's one of the most inventive things I've seen on TV, and the questions that Vince Gilligan is asking are just audacious. Anyway, that's enough about Pluribus. But we do have all of that. You can do that for $49.50 for a year. What that does is it allows me to do what I do. I'm an independent journalist. I don't have what you see is the operation. Corporation does not fund me. I'm not funded by billionaires. I'm funded by listeners. That makes me accountable to my subscribers. I'm accountable to readers. I'm funded by readers. I'm accountable to them. And I think that's important. I think that's the way a lot of media is going. It's hard work. It's unimaginably hard work, but I think it's more rewarding for me, and I hope it's rewarding for you. So if you can just sign up for the newsletter for free, that helps too, or tell someone about it. utahpolitics.news is the website. You can sign up for a year subscription, $49.50. You get it for a year. You get all that stuff, 10% off for right now. You do that at the website. Anyway, that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to put this out as a podcast tomorrow for everyone to listen to. And subscribers who are listening, we'll be doing a subscriber-only one in a couple of days, probably to wrap up the week or get ready for the next week. So be looking for that link in your email box. But until then, thank you so much for listening, for watching. Please go to my website, utahpolitics.news. Subscribe to me there. You can, or follow me on social. Send me a DM if you need it. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Until then, have a great rest of the week. Watch Pluribus. Love you all. Good night.